All right, we are going to call this council work session to order. Today is Wednesday, May 7th, 2025 at 3 p.m. And we're going to start with item number 1, clearing confusion and setting the facts straight. I do not believe that there were any comments from the last meeting from April 16th, so we will check that one off. And now we will open this up for visitor comments. So now is the time for visitor comments. The visitor comment period is an essential part of local government meetings. Each person has 3 minutes to speak. Please keep it to 3 minutes or under. The city council will take into input all consideration or into consideration. However, in observance of Oregon open meeting laws, this is not the time for dialogue, but rather a time for us to listen to you. Our city administrator, city recorder are taking notes of action if needed and will follow with you. Please make sure that you provided the contact information on the sign-in sheet in the back of the room. If in fact they would like to get a hold of you, they will know how to do so. With that, we will open it up for public comments. And if you could state your name for the record, please.
Thank you, Mary Massey. I'm Dr. Margaret Trenchard-Smith. I live at 29232 Huber Road, Scappoose, really Chapman. I'm president of the St. Helens Noontime Kiwanis Club. Mayor Massey, city council members, first, let me thank the city for its help with preparations for the St. Helens Kiwanis Community Parade coming up on June 21st. A special thanks to Buck Tupper, Ethan Sterling, Angelica Artero, Chief Hogue, and Mohammed Zahir. This year's parade theme is Show Off Your Wheels. Should be a ton of fun. Judy Thompson and Lisa Lewis and all the parade committee members are working hard to make it a terrific day for everyone. Second, our club would also like to take this opportunity to explain why we can't volunteer for the city's 4th of July celebration. Chiefly, our club's key members who are experienced in organizing parking won't be available on that day, so there would be a safety concern. Also, we had questions that we needed to be answered that couldn't be answered in time for us to decide to participate in the event. And we wanted to give plenty of notice that we wouldn't be available. Now, volunteering is how we make money for kids. So this is regrettable. Finally, I want to thank you, Mayor Massey, and the city councilors for reading and considering our letter of last week, proposing a means by which the City Council of St. Helens might offer significant financial support to the Columbia Pacific Food Bank. Whatever decision has been made or will be made about that proposal, we'll be glad and satisfied if our letter has raised awareness about an emerging situation. But our ask is even larger than that, actually. The Kiwanis Club's mission is to improve the world one child and one community at a time. As outlined in the letter, with rising food prices already worsening food insecurity, $6 million in federal funds and 4 million pounds of food from the USDA expected to be received this year have been withdrawn from Oregon's food banks. It is all too easy to predict the hunger that many children and their families here will experience as demand on the food bank increases just as its supply has decreased. The intent of the letter was to bring this crucial matter to the city council's and the public's attention. What we hope more broadly is that other philanthropic and service organizations, nonprofits, businesses, churches, and other groups will unite in support of the Columbia Pacific Food Bank and other means of providing food to people at this time, under its leadership and yours, to seek solutions to what our club perceives as a matter of increasing urgency, vital to the public interest. However, the mayor and city council choose to address it, know that this is absolutely sincere. The St. Helens Noontime Kiwanis Club and the Daybreakers, we are ready to work with and for you. Thank you so much for your attention, Mayor Massey and council members. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Pardon me if I leave out.
Just want to make sure that's. Next comment, please.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Mayor Massey.
Name for the record.
Oh, I am Mary Lydola. And thank you, Mayor Massey and the St. Helens City Council. My name is Mary Lydola, and I come before you today as the new Executive Director of our South Columbia Chamber of Commerce. In St. Helens, where we reside, known as the Historical Train Station Building, we are very concerned about the growing number of unsheltered individuals around our property, which is creating safety issues and driving away our members and our tenants. SAFE, capital SAFE, is a nonprofit that provides help to abused women and children in a secured setting. And we urge the City Council to take quick action to make this area safe again. They are one of our tenants. The problem is trash left behind by the homeless, loitering, smoking, aggressive and foul language, and behavior while accompanying our benches in front of our site, which is directly in front of the doors we enter and our members and guests use. Last night, we had a large black garbage bag full of trash items dumped on our historical bench. I've asked the neighbors, I've asked Emirates, I've asked surrounding neighbors about, do you have any video surveillance? And I've not gotten back with the owners yet. They haven't gotten back with me. So at this point, I do not have any evidence to share with you. But this is a weekly experience and one that I have reported several times to the non-emergency line. In fact, some of the homeless have been taking the paper out of our recycle bin and then lighting fires under our cars. This is not only concerning, but very dangerous. I've requested additional police patrols, and even if they park their marked police car at our central location of Columbia Boulevard and Highway 30, the police will be able to witness and hopefully apprehend these violators. This option is really open for discussion with us, and we would appreciate talking further about that. We are prepared to do what's necessary to stop and prosecute these individuals. However, we would like to request that the city provide no loitering, no smoking signs with a penal code so that we can prosecute. We need help and advice as to what our rights are and what we can legally do to stop this problem. I did confirm that our building is a historical building or leased to us from ODOT Rail. It was gifted to the chamber, however, not owned by the chamber. In this instance, how do you protect historical buildings? Some resolution ideas that we came up with was we will install cameras.
Okay.
And so if we do this, install the cameras, what happens next? What are the steps to correct this problem? And I thank you.
Next comment, please.
My name is Ron Tromlitz. I filed for a public records request April 1st, 2025. I requested a copy of the transcript of the March 21st, 2022 mediation. The mediation resulted in a settlement and mutual release signed by John Walsh. I received a response April 17th, 2025. My request was given to the engineering manager and city manager, administrator, stating the city does not have a transcript of the mediation. The city considered the case closed. I talked to John Walsh April 18th, because I didn't consider this an accurate account of the mediation, having no documentation of the mediation of the 2 million gallon rehabilitation failure. John said there was a Zoom mediation with attorneys in different rooms. I don't believe there was a mediation negotiations without a recording, transcript, notes, or a video, which needs to be provided to the public on request. St. Helens City Council meetings are recorded. April 21st, I drafted a letter to David Bowers, city attorney, requesting him to provide a transcript, notes, recording, or email video of the March 21st mediation. The concern is that the public deserves an answer for the cause and responsibility of the Pittsburgh Road 2 million gallon reservoir rehabilitation failure. I haven't received a response from David Bowers. I believe that John Walsh and the attorneys are responsible for the condition of the 2 million gallon derelict reservoir. John had responsibility for the people he supervises. The city hired Bear Investigation and Consultants to investigate the 42,000 gallon per day loss. December 20th, 2017, BIC's assessment report wasn't favorable report for the city. March 1st, 2021, the city hired Walker Consultants to investigate the use, the cause, and responsibility for the 2 million gallon reservoir rehabilitation failure. Walker did an investigation. The reports exposed conditions unfavorable to the city's position. The city determined to abandon litigation and rely on mediation. The Walker report was expected to be a supporting asset during mediation. April 8th, 2022, using mediation, the settlement agreement became John Walsh's client privilege, not the city council's client privilege. The client privilege is the 449 collection of or diligence, something neglected, left undone, and self-protection. The city has a problem with transparency and omission. Thank you.
You, Mayor Massey, Councilor Steve Toskey, citizen St. Helens. I'll try to keep my comments brief. I know we got a big day today. Regarding the Amani Center waiver SDC charges, I think that, that there should be an overall discussion about policy on SDC charges when we meet with the budget committee. The city of Portland is waiving their SDC charges, trying to get more housing developed. And I know there are a lot of housing projects that are sort of jammed up, trying to come online in our city for quality housing. I think what we should be discussing as a budget committee, a policy regarding SDC charges and whether to waive them for developers or developing housing. And that should be the discussion, then deciding whether we want to waive them for charities as well. Charities might even be in a better position to pay or SDC charges than private developers that are taking a lot of risk and putting a lot of effort out trying to get housing done. Regarding the police station, I say we have none of the above options at all. I think that we should be considering adding on to the current police station. At the last budget committee meeting, we were hearing that our city administrator still can't find a way to get our police station built without another $2 million being spent by the public. The police station was originally designed and built to be added onto. That's never been considered. It's never been an option. We've wasted now at least $2.6 million trying to kind of have this idea of building a city center near roundabout. It's always been, let's get a police station built. Can we do that? And I'm going to go back to what I said a year ago, 2 years ago, was this project should be removed from John Walsh and should go to Public Works. And we should give Mohammed the job to get the thing done for 10 million or 8 million. And we'll probably have a police station before because that's how that guy rolls. And then about Treadway, I see there's a discussion about Treadway. and this is gonna be a little bit more of a discussion in the budget committee meeting. But I did a public records request and I reviewed all of the income and expenses on Treadway. Every single one. I've spent hours on it. So I can tell you, we're not making money under Treadway, and I don't think we should be necessarily telling them that how to do their business. What we should be telling them is, we want you to be running this show so that we are generating income. So right now, Treadway double charged us for their first 4 months last year. They shook us down for the full amount of pay, even though they only worked for 5 months. And so right now we're looking at $240,000 lost in last year's Halloween Town, another 240,000 at minimally lost in this year's Halloween Town. So I'm thinking of talking to them about a profit model where, overall revenue. Yeah, I'm done. Anyway, I just want to let you know that. Thank you.
Next public comment, please.
Topaz. My favorite subject, accuracy of council minutes is written down and accepted by the council. Today, there's going to be a presentation about fixing or actually building another water reservoir. Ron has given you reams and reams of problems, questions about things, none of which have answered. And a number of times has actually given physical data, and some of the physical data that he's given, I've been able to determine where the water leak is. That determination obviously wasn't followed. It's your data, your simple calculation, which wasn't done, which will become critically important for the new reservoir. But all of the information that was presented here never appeared in the minutes. And another place where the stuff that didn't appear in minutes gets quite important. John Walsh, back in 2017-18, made a presentation to Portland Harbor Cleanup about using the St. Helens Lagoon as a dump site. I cannot find any authorization by the city council that he was allowed to do that. I have not been able to find out what the presentation actually was. I was at that meeting, but I've not found any paperwork that allowed him to do that. There were a couple of things that were brought up at the meeting by other people that are critically important for long-term financial conditions here in St. Helens. The other problem with that was Mo Forster's at all these meetings. Mo Forster has done all these surveys on our lagoon. Mo Forster is now project manager of the Portland Harbor business. So doing the studies that make it favorable for them to dump stuff here seems like an ethics problem. There was another set of records, again, didn't appear in the reports, and I can't find it in the minutes of the meeting, which goes back to, there was a presentation at the Meriwether Center about the waterfront. And in that presentation was also a presentation of using the lagoon. And one of the Mo Forster people had a continuing saying, no liquefaction, no liquefaction, no liquefaction. There was a great deal of worry about the toxic waste being liquefied, which is true. But not the point. The fact that liquefaction underneath the lagoon, which the state knew 50 years ago, was not reported by Mo Forster. Now it's getting to be the level of inaccuracy and elimination of data at these council meetings that doesn't appear in the record is costing us a lot of money. With the water reservoir, it's better than $10 million. With the lagoon, it's going to be more than that. But we're not getting real data that's being presented here that appears in the record. The other thing we know is we're
Stephen.
told that no, other people spoke
I
longer
know,
than
I'm
3
just
minutes.
giving,
I'm
I'm just
going to
giving you
do it
the,
too.
warning. We need to finish the sentence.
I
please.
know,
Okay.
I know. They didn't get a
Thank you.
warning, but thank you. The real question is much of this is electronic, not by St. Helens, by an outside company. And what verification do we have that electronic data will be available in 50 years? State law only requires as built for 1 year. Right now, lagoon and the water tank has gone more than the 1 year or even 5 years. So we have a problem with our data and the accuracy of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Next public comment, please. Do we have anybody online? Okay. All right, we will move on to number 2, quarterly reports from departments and divisions. So, Gloria, I think you were up. Did anybody have any comments? Most of the stuff, I believe, that was in there into our budget committee. However, we did get a supplemental report on tourism.
Yeah.
And we would like if you would run us through this so that we can have it on record and ask any additional questions. And this would be something like we would like to, if council agrees, publish in the our memo that we do.
That was very thorough and I appreciated
Yes.
having it broken down. Like, that's what we've been looking for, so.
Welcome, yeah, so we have posted it online. The and you're referring to the tourism.
Yes.
So do you have questions on that? I know that you just received it this morning, so I can kind of go through it.
If you could just quickly go through it, I think that'd be helpful. That way, then it, people would actually have the recording of it if they would like as well. So if you.
Sure. So I did an income statement from our system. And then I took and broke it out the 2 events that are really of question, and the Spirit of Halloween Town and the holiday in the plaza. So in the income statement, well, let me back up. For the Spirit of Halloween Town, there was a revenue and net income of 489,000. And then of that, there was a 5% profit share. And that is per the contract. So that gave the city a net of 460, almost 465,000. So that remains in the WANA account. And that is used for the rest of the year. So we also paid off the interfund loan that established the WANA account. So then the preceding the Spirit of Halloween Town was the holiday in the plaza, which was a net loss of 113,000. So that's why we keep funds in that WANA account in order to fund these events that we know are not profitable.
The initial transfer, the seed money, so to speak, that was from the interfund loan from the community development to the WANA account was 200,000. So that has
Correct.
been paid back, just to be clear.
Correct. The authority on that was we could have done 300,000 was our supplemental budget, but we only used 200,000. And that was paid off in the same year that it was borrowed. So it's a net zero effect, which is a really good thing. So outside of the those 2 events, again, there's professional services. And these are not the contracted services. These are professional services, and mostly those were attorney's fees related to the prior event contractor. And then also, aside from Spirit of Halloween Town and Holiday in the Plaza, projects and programs includes the repayment of the interfund loan, like I said, and then 13 nights for summer of 2024. So there was some revenue and expense for that event, 13 nights in 2024. So currently, Treadway is working on gearing up for our 13 nights 2025. And so there's going to be primarily expenditures, getting ready for that. And then there will be some revenue coming in, I suspect soon, for sponsorships and those things. And we do not have a current report of where we're at on that planning, and I'm sure that we could get something from Treadway where they are on that. But according to all of our reconciliations, it looks like we are in good condition. The currently there is in the Awana account as of March 31st, 2025, there was $269,000 in that account. And then I also wanted to point out that our lodging taxes, those are deposited into the Wells Fargo account because those aren't related to the events.
To be clear, the Wells Fargo, that's the city account. The Awana account is the joint account between city and Treadway for the contractor that we all have, like the city and them have access to.
So just a correction on the joint account, it's not really a joint account.
Okay.
They have no ownership of that account. They have access to be able to pay expenditures out of it and make deposits into it. But it is owned and reconciled and managed by the city.
Just like it's another city account.
Yes. The Wells Fargo account is, yes, the general checking account, and it encompasses the whole city.
Was this a cumbersome thing for you to put together? I mean, I assume the P and L piece was, but with this, I'm just kind of asking if that's possible when you're doing if council agrees, because it's always such a hot topic, if when you do your reports, if this would be something that we could potentially get, because this was really well put together.
Sure, yeah, I could,
Events.
Yeah, whatever, but I thought this was really well done. It's very simple.
when we have events, yes, we can. The two statements for the events were basically done by Treadway, and we reconciled them to the Awana account and to our records.
This should be.
So that's kind of our starting point. So when we have that information from Treadway, then we can compile it, reconcile it and compile it and report it out to you. So I have in the quarterly reports, I have included the tourism fund in my regular quarterly report, but I can expand on the narrative on that if that certainly.
Be appreciated because it's such a hot topic.
I really enjoyed reading it. Being able to see like how much profit the store made. Like those are things I felt like was really important for us to know and
Yeah.
understand. So it was nice to see all that information.
Right. There's a lot of misinformation and it's good for you to have the complete.
This was really great. Counselor Hubbard, do you have anything on this? Any questions?
No, I think it looks fine.
I think the only question, good. The only question I would have is, the ambiguity on Treadway gets information, right? So it's like, if that's, I can't recall if for the contract, it was defined that they need to they're required to report at specific dates so that the city can reconcile. That plays into it. Is that?
They report to us monthly, yes. Yeah, so we
meet with-
reconcile the Awana account
For this?
every month, and we use their records in order to manage and review what has been spent and deposited.
So we could have it after events. Otherwise, it could be just a part of your report to council.
Sure, yes.
Perfect. Excellent. That was so nice. Thank you so much. We know how busy you've been with the budget committee and getting that ready, but this was very much appreciated. Counselor, President Chilton, do you have anything else on that? Nope. All right. Okay. I think that is it. The next is the additional information on timber insurance. Chris and David. Go, is that right?
Vaselenko.
Vaselenko.
This is just like it's spelled.
You don't want to come up here, Chris?
He's making me sit back here so I don't, so I'm not gonna be interrupting him, so I'll get a little closer so I can.
Sure. All right, so there should have been a copy of the quote in the packet for you guys to review, correct?
Yep.
So I guess I have a list of questions from our last meeting, but would any new questions come up once you had a chance to review that information?
So I do have a question, of course.
Sure.
So on the exclusions, it's basically, and you look at it, it's kind of force majeure, we have force majeure, right? And then I'm not exactly sure, I didn't have time to look it up, so I apologize, it's probably a stupid question, but the subterranean fire, can you tell me what that is?
You know, I don't know that we'll see much of that with timber, but like fire below ground. So if like the root system, I guess we catch fire, that could be an exclusion. I've seen more subterranean fires with mining type
Yeah.
of operations. So you're gonna find that in almost any insurance policy, they exclude things that have virtually no chance of happening anyway, just to kind of cover the insurance provider. So but yeah, I don't see that as being a huge,
Only one I laughed about was hail, like.
Yeah.
I mean, really, like,
it's a fire policy, right? So.
I got it. I got
Yeah,
it.
yeah, and there, and I did review the form on this just to make sure there wasn't anything that was crazy, but yeah, there's exclusions for seepage and pollution and different things like that that don't really apply, so. Any other questions on any of the specifics in the quote itself, the limits, deductibles, things like
The
that?
other one I thought was concerning on exclusions is drought, like that one was
Right,
exclusion.
yeah, I have to take to look at it to see, because if they say drought as an exclusion, it may just be drought and maybe the death of a tree. I don't know if a drought causing fire would necessarily be the excluded part of
Because
it.
this is
So,
only for fire.
right, it's a fire policy, so. That would be the.
Sorry, I always have questions, but I did read through this.
No, you're fine.
And the other thing on here, like I didn't see that as an endorsement or an exclusion. Can you speak to that at all?
You know, I didn't see anything regarding arson specifically when I reviewed the form this morning, but I can double check and get back with John on that for you just to make sure. But I don't recall seeing that today, no.
I asked that last time. So I
No, you're totally
didn't
fine.
know if it would be in the
I
exclusion.
can get an email back out this afternoon or first thing tomorrow morning, so it shouldn't be a problem. But yeah, those will be the exclusions. And if there are the specific, we talked about drought, subterranean fire, I can try and find those definitions as well for you, so you have those to review. So here in the, I believe the questions from last time were around salvage rates, fire breaks, things like that. The contract doesn't even address those. So there should be no required fire breaks and any salvage should be for the city. So with any losses, they actually adjust these via satellite, so there probably wouldn't even be boots on the ground. And they can determine the severity of the burns, so there would be a tiered payout. If it's a minor burn, they would pay up to 30% of the agreed amount. Moderate to severe would be 100%. So that's how they kind of work the salvage piece of that, because it's not a complete burn. We're going to get a partial payout, and then you can harvest the rest to make up the difference.
Your deductible would be 200,000.
Correct. For firefighting, yeah, so that would be firefighting expenses incurred specifically for fighting that forest fire event.
And then were there restrictions for what we can use like, can we close recreation? Do we have to close recreation in that area?
I didn't see anything regarding recreation or anything like that in the form when I reviewed it, so
We wouldn't have to close the area.
no, not to my knowledge, and I can again double check on that, but to my understanding, that would not be.
Make sure if somebody's riding a quad back there or something and it catches fire,
Sure. No, I understand that, so, and I will verify that for you as well.
Ambiguous policy ever.
It's a specialty policy. It's not through a standard care, it's through a Lloyd. So it doesn't follow any of the standard ISO forms or anything else. It's very well manuscripted by that specific company because it is a very specialty coverage. Most carriers are not excited about trying to insure trees against fire, unfortunately. So, you know, the insurance company wants to make a profit as well. And then of course, costs, I know we had an estimate last time, but this is the firmed up figure with all of the broker fees, because we have to go through a specialty broker to get access to the program. Would be $739.70 for the 12-month policy period.
Million.
Exactly. Any additional questions from anybody?
I don't have any additional questions, but I appreciate you coming back and giving
Yeah.
answers.
Absolutely. So like I said, John, I'll send you an email with the questions and some of these definitions. I should be able to get those to you by tomorrow, I would imagine. And then if you have additional questions, let me know. And if the council wants to move forward with this, we can go ahead and get that going for you. Anything else at all?
Chris, did you have anything to?
No, I thought of a whole bunch of things while he was talking, but no, and just to reiterate, this is a specialty policy and you don't see these policies hardly ever at this part of the Oregon. And it's they're very difficult to get and to find companies that will write them. There's not a ton of companies out there that will write this kind of stuff. So they're fairly narrow focused.
Absolutely. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Great. Now we have a request to support the new Armani Center building. This was continued from April 16th. So that.
Yes,
How are you?
hello, Beth Polito. Nice to see you again. Thank you. Appreciate the invitation to come back. I sent over some information. I sent over a letter on our request. That it was really a blanket request. I added up all of the fees that come from the city and I put them in the request. I know that that is a large request, and I also invited an opportunity to have conversation about what may be reasonable and what may be unreasonable for the city to consider in supporting our building project that we're endeavoring to break ground on this year, if at all possible. I don't know if there's any questions or conversation around what was presented.
Well,
I know it was 6 pages, so you may not have had
I
an
read-
opportunity.
I read them all, and I appreciated all the information that you. Obviously, is a hefty lift at almost 100,000 on the estimated quote. And I was looking through this on, our SDCs, those are really, really challenging because they've still got to come from somewhere. And then, I did like how you have in here that there's, different opportunities with the permits and reduction of fees in there. So I think that's something that council can possibly put up tonight at our general session to talk about. But I thought this was pretty comprehensive. So I don't really have any additional questions based on what you put here. I mean, I've spent some time going through it and have some potential recommendations for council tonight, but.
I've had some conversations with both Heidi and Mike, and they've really shared yes, your staff is amazing to work with. But they've really outlined kind of what your requirements are as a city on having to, it's kind of a pass through, or you're, obligated to pay these fees to the state or get them because of the state. And so I don't know if there's specific fees on here that are more malleable than others, but we would appreciate any amount of opportunity to kind of relieve us from this burden. But also our conditional use permit is up for I think it expires this month possibly. We do have all of our documents submitted to the engineering department for review to pull a building permit. And we would love to move forward on that as soon as possible. One of the reasons we haven't is just because of this opportunity to have a conversation around any fees that might be waivable. If that happens to be the review, fee, then we didn't want to prepay it and then have you, oh, no, that's actually one that we can help you out with. So knowing that sooner than later would be fantastic, because then we know if we need to write a check or not and get those reviewed, and because I think it's an 8 to 10 week process at this point for pulling building permits. We're still fiercely fundraising for this, and
Yeah, I was bummed I missed the run.
we had a record-breaking number of people at our run. We had 530.
Amazing.
And our largest run before that was 300. So it was pretty amazing.
It's so hard because there's, so many organizations that come in, and obviously budgets are tough everywhere, but.
Just for the food bank, you know?
Yes, yeah.
So hard, because like what you guys do for our youngsters, it's heartbreaking to see
And I-
who's on here in this community and what vital role you play. So thank you so much for.
The only ones I'm going to. I promise I'm going to every single city in our county, because we are a countywide organization. Last year we served 84 students out of St. Helens, and that's roughly well, if you include like Columbia City, Deer Island, Warren, like some of those kids are coming here. Well, that roughly 3.5% of the student body in St. Helens comes through our doors. So the fact that we can calculate a percentage is actually even disheartening, but
The numbers last time, it just made me sick to my stomach. It's just really sad.
but having double the capacity to be able to see kids that DHS is not currently sending to us because of capacity issues all it means is that we get to intervene sooner. We get to interrupt generational child abuse and not have it move into and throughout our society in the future.
Everybody, Counselor Hubbard? Yes? Okay. Was there something?
Would you like me to return this evening to?
I don't think you need.
You don't have to, we
Yeah,
can respond.
We have a very good presentation in our packet,
Okay.
and I think we have enough information. So thank you so much.
Fantastic. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for coming back.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, number 5, we have review amendment to number 2 to the financing contract with Oregon Business Development Partner. My papers, and that is, I believe, Jenny. Jenny, it's still you.
So here, if there's any questions, I can go quickly over it. There was the cover sheet that kind of outlined the summary, and then the actual amendment is on for tonight's regular session for approval.
Okay, so I have some probably stupid questions. Does anybody else have any questions before I dive in?
I was gonna say, sounds like there's no anticipated delays. It's just in case to wrap things up.
As far as the timeline extension goes, yeah, that was recommended by the loan officer at the state, and we weren't gonna argue. They recommended that time frame. We didn't suggest October. We anticipate completing everything by June 30th. So.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that I was reading that correctly. So our total project, I can't talk, cost, it was updated to the 22,708,627. So that was from the original 15,516,178. So the total amount remains unchanged, which was the 14,677,000. That's right? Okay, so then the question I have, the city expended or allocated 7,977,915 in matching funds from various sources. So they came from different, like either grants or different community development fund.
Yeah, so the cover sheet, if we could pull it up, there's a table in the cover for this agenda.
And I apologize because there was so much in this week's packet
Sure,
for
yeah.
discussions for today. I really tried to make sure that I went through it, but
Yeah,
That's a
so
lot.
the table answers that question.
Okay,
So it
right.
came from
that's where I got that.
all of
Okay.
these sources. Yep.
So We are not going to be, by extending it, essentially, just to be clear, we're only extending the deadline to October for any type of punch list type document, administrative functions, no additional funds.
That's right.
No chance of project cost overruns or anything of the sort if we go over June 30th.
That's right.
Hey, that is it. We're just changing the end date,
Yep.
project completion.
Yeah, the other thing too is that the grants are reimbursable. So we have to close the project out and then submit for reimbursement to get these grants. So there's always administration that happens after projects close out and public contracts close out.
So that was actually one of my things on here too. Is there any risk that we're seeing right now on our grant funding? So the ones that haven't been received, is there any, after October, when we submit all that stuff, do we anticipate any issues at all with
Like
getting?
from the federal level,
Yes.
state level.
Oh, I see what you're asking.
Yes.
No, there's been no communication, as far as jeopardizing the contracts that they've already agreed to. That's a good question.
And if so, we'd only be that's horrible, but the 7 million would be what we still need to collect on, correct? Am I reading that right?
So we've spent most of what is in this table already.
So how much are we actually waiting for reimbursement?
There's 3 grants up there.
So we've reimbursed, so the first one, the OPRD LGGP grant. We've received everything but the last 10% of that, and that's because the project has to close out.
Okay.
The OPRD LWFC, that's Land and Water Conservation, we've received just over half of that.
Okay.
And, you know, I could have submitted for reimbursement, but I'd like to just do it in one chunk when it's, because we're so close to completion at this point. It's just more admin work for me.
Okay.
So, and then the Travel Oregon grant, we just received the second half of that, I think 2 weeks ago. So the 100,000's been received.
So there's not a lot in outstanding in grants.
No, not at all. Yeah. And, we're actually ahead of the curve on grant reporting and everything. Like, we're gonna complete those well ahead of the deadlines for those.
That's it. That's all my questions. Counselor Hubbard?
Almost there.
Counselor Sundin? Council President Chilton?
No.
All right, that's it. Thank you.
Did you guys want me to come back? I know Counselor Gunderson's not here. Is there any need for me to be here for regular session?
I don't think
You
so.
won't be here probably then either. So.
Okay, great.
I don't think so. Thank you so much, Jenny. The review of Gable Road rectangular rapid flashing beacon. Aaron. How are you today?
Good. How's everyone?
Good.
So no presentation today. These are just a couple staff reports I wanted on the work session that you could review. If you had any questions on it, then I'm happy to answer.
Nice job on them, by the way.
You want to some information on it?
No, I went through and I don't have any.
I think the only thought that I had was, I know when we were building Broadleaf, there was a traffic study done. We know the intersection is bad. We
Wait,
talked
wait.
about like a pedestrian overpass and some other things, but those things are out of our financial ability at this time. But did we do a pedestrian study? Because that, I feel like that should have come up early on, that we needed to be concerned
No, there
about this.
was none, and we don't really have a requirement to do that, but it's certainly something that we probably.
I was thinking later, I was like, wow, we should have thought about that, because there is a lot of people there that aren't probably driving.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more pedestrian traffic in that area.
I mean, that's one of the reasons why when the apartments were being built, there was actually not gonna be any mid-crossing through there. And so people, when we looked at it and saw people were just gonna start.
Oh,
just
yeah.
Crossing, we just decided, let's put that there. People do use it.
Can we take a step back?
Yeah.
Your staff report.
Yes.
Okay. Did anybody have any questions?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I thought we were.
So Counselor Sundin, President Chilton. Counselor Howard, because she started talking about her staffing report. So we're good on the staffing report. So no
Alright.
questions, very well put together. Thank you so much on that. Okay. I'm like, I'm
Let's have
looking,
some
I
questions
was looking
about
through
it.
the staffing report. I'm like, I didn't even see that.
Where is that? Yeah.
Okay. Now the beacon.
So the beacon is, that's what we were talking about. Well, kind of. So this one, I mean, somebody was hit at the intersection. And I'm sure you've seen people crossing with small children across there, and I've seen people on canes and walkers and looking bewildered trying to cross that intersection. So we do have the budget to do it in this cycle. So we decided to just go ahead and get that done. There's been a lot of requests for it.
That is rough there, even in the morning, like.
Yeah.
It's a pretty unsafe.
And the flashing beacons, they're reasonably cheap to install. This one, I think is gonna cost us about just under $60,000. TFT is gonna do the work for us. And
Similar to the one over by the high school. on-
yes,
Okay,
and
That's
this
what I was
very
thinking.
similar like that one, almost exactly the same. And like McBride, we like to keep them the same so that for operation point that we can switch out stuff and have materials on hand if anything. So.
I didn't have any additional questions on that.
Like that one.
I already went on my thought, which was that we should have thought about that ahead of time, but you know. Into the game.
Counselor Hubbard, do you have anything on that? And then we had obviously the reservoir sitting study. Did anybody on the staff report, did anybody have any comments on that? That was number 7 when she's here. Nope. No, it was. I didn't have any.
I mean, it looks like we're ready to move forward to the next steps, so.
So basically, yeah, they're gonna come in, do the hydraulic study, find out the best land. They already have searched out and seen a couple other properties that we could put this on, make sure the hydraulics work. And we're gonna go from there. First step.
Thank you so much. The request from RSG Telecom letter of support for broadband equity access and deployment BEAD grant program for the Columbia County led broadband project. Do you want to talk about these two, John? Because we are in one line.
Yeah, last meeting, we signed a letter of support for the BEAD funding with Comcast, and I let you know that there was gonna be a subsequent one coming, and this is one of 2 that we actually got requests for. And the one for RSG is the county project, for the city and the county working on this broadband project are also gonna compete for broadband funding, and they'd like to have the city's letter of support, as well as all of the other anchor institution that contributes 10% to the score of the application and their funding. So
We're just supporting everybody, kind of whoever gets there, gets there.
that is up to you. There's also the one that was added for Astound.
Do you see any
That was another
potential
choice.
challenges if we support everybody or?
I mean, Comcast is a known entity. Astound has customers here. The public access, the RSG is a little different platform. They are looking at an open access internet, so other providers could ride on their infrastructure, so you wouldn't have utility poles with multiple lines on them. They could all go through that same line. It's their business model. Comcast is very much proprietary and they have their own infrastructure.
Right.
That's Astound's. I'm not sure exactly what Astound's business model is, but presumably they like to get money to do infrastructure as well. So.
Well, this is definitely one I'm in support of, so I would love to have a letter of support from the city, but. For both of them, at least, well, for this one, yeah.
Counselor Hubbard, do you have any questions?
This is all way out of my. Why don't we just have Starlink?
Yep, I answered it.
Counselor Sundin,
Candidly.
do you have anything?
No.
Okay. All right, let's see, review proposed amendments to the governing policy in St. Helens Municipal Code, section 2030 regarding city administrators. Our city attorney, Ashley Wygott.
Middle. Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council. My name is Ashley Wygod, and I am presenting from the City Attorney's Office. So as introduced today, I'm discussing proposed revisions to the city's governing policy. The city's governing policy delegates responsibilities to the City Council and the City Administrator for how the city manages its business and operates the city and supervises the city employees. So in conversations over the last several months, City Council has asked for recommendations and just further discussion about how cities similar to St. Helens, how their governing structure is. And so we've taken a look at some best practices and other ways that cities operate and recommendations from the League of Oregon Cities. City Council called a special work session on March 17th and discussed some of these findings and recommendations. And so tonight we're going to discuss those recommendations. Those recommendations have been put together in a proposed revision for the governing policy for us to discuss and make any revisions to the governing policy as it's proposed and for further consideration and adoption at a future meeting. So today is just for discussion and asking, answering any questions, asking for additional research. As part of this process, it took a look at some proposed revisions to the city code also, and how some city code provisions that discuss the city administrator's roles are outlined. And I made some proposed recommendations for things to add to St. Helens City Code. So does anybody have any questions before we kind of dive into the substance? You can, this is, yeah, does anybody have any questions? This is for us. We can take this off maybe because it's not quite relevant yet for people to consider. Any questions?
I have some, but I'll wait till you go through it and then make my comments as you go through.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, and we ask any first question. So just as some background information, there's 3 main types of governing structures in Oregon. There is a commission form of government, which is when city councilors are elected, and then each city councilor has kind of a portfolio of departments that they manage. And so that's one form of government. The only example I know of a commission form of government was the city of Portland, and they have now shifted away from that. Then there's a mayor council form of government, and that's where the mayor and city council are all elected. But the mayor is the person who's appointed to be also like the CEO of the city and kind of be in that management role, supervising all of the employees and handling the business affairs. And then for the majority of cities in Oregon, they have a council administrator form of government or a council city manager form of government. And that's what St. Helens has. And they have that through their charter and through provisions that have been adopted in city code. And so in looking at the city's governing policy, some of the typical ways a council administrator form of government operates didn't always align with how the governing policy exists today. And so when I took a look at some of the best practices from the League of Oregon Cities, there were some recommendations that I've identified and that we discussed in the March 17th work session. So now, yeah, thank you. So on the left-hand column is the current governing policy. And then on the right-hand column are whether or not there's a change based on best practices from the League of Oregon Cities and how majority of other cities operate, majority of other council administrator cities.
It's the exact same copy that you had here on the 17th.
Yes. And you can see the top, maybe you scroll up, it's like.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. This was from the work session packet.
Correct. Okay.
So as we kind of go through it from the top, in the governing policy, it's broken down a little bit differently, it's organized differently, but this is the substance of the current governing policy and then recommendations to how we recommend it be updated. So for hiring, city council hires the city administrator, and we're not proposing any changes to that structure. City council hires department heads. In council administrator forms of government, the city administrator is the one who selects department heads for hire, but it is an okay and common practice for a city council to confirm the selection that the city administrator makes. And so that's a recommendation to shift the governing policy. Under the current governing policy, there was a collaborative process between the city liaison, council liaison, and city administrator and department head for hiring department employees. Again, that's not a common practice. Typically, department heads hire the department employees. It's not something that city council or city liaisons are involved with. So we're recommending a shift there. For supervision and discipline, the way the current governing policy is set up, we're not really recommending any changes, except for department heads that supervise their employees. There could be room for a city administrator input when the department head is supervising or disciplining its employees. So that brings us to termination. Under the current policy, city council terminates city administrator, no change there. City council terminates department heads or is responsible for that. And we are recommending a shift there, as the city administrator is the one that is working with department heads, and it's typical for them to take that managerial and supervisory role. In the current governing policy that calls for this collaborative process between the council liaison and the city administrator and department heads. And again, we're recommending a shift there so that all the responsibility for this supervisory role of employees rests with the city administrator or with department heads in that case. Yeah, department heads with input from the city administrator. And then the last piece of the governing policy was talked about performance evaluations. In the current governing policy, the city council evaluates the city administrator, but there weren't parameters around when or how frequently that happens. And there was a desire in the discussions that city council wanted that to happen annually, and that in reaching out to League of Oregon Cities, they say that's very common for city administrators to be reviewed annually. So we're recommending to shift that frequency of evaluation to be an annual process. Council liaison and city administrator evaluate department heads. That's the process in the current governing policy. We're not recommending any change, but again, to put in a frequency of annually.
So I have a question there. So I went back and rewatched the 17th meeting.
Okay.
Based on my recollection, there was a few things under here. So the city council evaluates city administrator. We had annually, but then otherwise specified. We had discussed that, and so I don't know if it's worthy or council wants that added in here, so there's no ambiguity, so it leaves that room. Also, number two, I feel like I recall from that meeting that we decided against having the council liaison and city administrator evaluate department head. Based on my recollection of the meeting, we were removing council liaisons from participating from any of the evaluations for reasons. And so that would leave it as the city administrator evaluates department heads annually or otherwise specified. And that evaluation then was brought to council. I thought we eliminated us participating in any type of performance reviews.
Okay, and thank you for bringing that to my attention. And so tell me, can you repeat the part about what is brought to city council then?
On the second one down, the council liaison and city administrator evaluates department head. Based on my recollection, it was the city administrator evaluates department heads. That is the city administrator's job. And then the review is then shared with city council.
Okay. You know that.
We discussed that because of the fact we didn't want to be involved in anything like a performance review.
That is, that is striking a chord with me, so I appreciate your recollection there, and we'll make that note. Does anyone have any?
You remind me of the reasoning for why we needed, not that part, the other part that you said earlier, where you said, instead of for the timeline of why we need to have it say like at discretion.
Oh, annually or otherwise specified?
Otherwise specified.
Because of the ambiguity of that, if we're saying annually, then it's set forth as annually versus it reduces ambiguity as annually or otherwise specified. So if you go into the evaluations and there maybe is an opportunity for improvement, you could say, well, we're going to evaluate then in another 6 months versus we're specifying in our governing policy that it's only annually.
I think that it actually makes it more muddier if we're saying it could happen whenever.
But it can happen whatever. But if not, can you push back and say it's only annually if it's in the governing policy?
I just
Here's
want
the suggestion. Yeah,
doing the job that you think it's doing.
I think I was feeling a little bit similarly to Counselor Chilton about just that it might make it have a longer timeline than desired. But I would say that when you do these evaluations, if there is a desire, and I know I just went through this recently, if there was a desire to evaluate the person more frequently, then that's put into the evaluation itself. And then that way there is this quarterly check-in or a quarterly reevaluation. So it can be done in that way.
It doesn't leave the city in a liability situation where an employee could feel targeted if there is some opportunities to improve. And instead of annually, we're saying we're going to be evaluating you quarterly. That's just posing it out there for any risk for the city for ambiguity.
Well, and if you're doing an evaluation, at the end of that evaluation, it's like, let's meet again to review what you've done to improve, then you're already putting it in that evaluation that you're setting up another evaluation, if that makes sense.
I do, but
So
when I
yeah.
get it, I just read, I read things in regulations, right? So when you have something that says something shall be done or done annually, then if you're doing it prior to that, does that also raise any type of flags for retaliation or anything like that? Where if you don't have the ambiguity where you're saying annually, if not sooner or specified in your review, I don't know how to articulate it, but if it was sooner than annually and you did it biannually, does that pose a problem or risk for the city for any type of retaliation situations?
I think that's a good question. I would say for best practices and my familiarity with how evaluations are performed, that it is very common to, especially if someone has an issue that has been raised in the evaluation, to then require evaluations more frequently than annually. So I think that you're on safe ground there. But this also brings me to actually the text of the governing policy. If you can all turn to there's no page numbers.
On really quick to the one to the left of that, though, the council liaison and city administrator, should we chat about it real quick? Because that was something that was brought up, and it was, in fact, if I recall correctly, if there was something that was unfavorable in an employment review, hopefully there won't be, but then, and council being, drug into any type of legalities for that. So we were trying to remove ourselves from that.
I will say, I think that that's a really good recommendation, and I am recalling that discussion, and I apologize for not incorporating that revision into the changes. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Does council have any opinions on that?
I'm pretty sure it was a consensus.
Yeah. Perfect.
And there's one other place where that shows up is in 3. Or
Yeah, I saw that too.
decisions requiring policy interpretation of significant consequence or probable controversies shall be made in collaborative process involving discussion and resolution between the council liaison and city administrator.
Okay.
That's a little different than the review process. Just has something new that hadn't happened before, and getting some feedback from a counselor.
But it still does.
But that's just, we'll bring them in, still brings them in.
That could be potentially problematic.
So, yep, I think that this subsection 3B is talking about collaborative decision-making on policy issues. I think that an alternative to this, that 3B is talking about when there's a significant policy issue for the city administrator to work with the city liaison and any department head to discuss the policy issue and what the intent, if there is actually a policy issue or if there is clear policy.
If it's pertaining to employment issue, then we're drug into it. Should it all say legal instead interpretation of that? Because if it is an employee violation or misconduct or whatever the case is, then we're right back to where we were.
Yeah, let me give that some thought. I think that the intent here was that really if the city administrator has, if a policy issue comes to the city administrator, what the city administrator would typically do with that in a council administrator form of government is come and discuss that at a city council meeting. And so that's probably a preferred solution to 3B, which is having kind of a front line of discussing it with the council liaison, and I am fine with that. I recommend it, that approach also, not having one city council liaison talking with the city administrator, but instead, if there is a significant policy issue for discussion, for the city administrator to bring that to the entire council. Does anybody have any questions on that?
The only thing I come back to is if it's an employment issue, right? Because then we could be potentially rendering a decision that it has a legal consequence on policy interpretation when it has to deal with employees.
I would say that those, I'm trying to think of how to best phrase that, but how to respond, but the policy issues that we're talking about are policy issues about how the city is administered, but not necessarily employment issues. That being said, we can clarify that.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that policy issues not related to employment.
Yeah, that would be helpful, because if we're talking about that personnel policies and procedures, it could fall into this, right? So I think that not having that ambiguity would be great, or putting one of our liaisons in a situation that are having to navigate that.
Yeah, and just for some history, that's how it's worked. We have, work with the police commissioner or the library person or the whoever's assigned to those departments to just figure it out at the ground level, and it doesn't always apply uniformly across the organization, and it probably should. Things outside of the personnel policies.
You say, can we like delineate that outside of personnel policy or employment?
So, yes, we can
Talking about
delineate that.
Gooses or honking gooses, then yeah.
And so, but what I want to clarify is 3B talks about decisions requiring policy interpretation of significant consequence or probable controversy shall be made in a collaborative process involving a discussion with the council liaison. Is it better to not have that process at all? So kind of strike 3B altogether and have the city administrator just bring issues to all of city council. And the council liaison, and I know there's agenda item to talk about council liaisons after this, but the council liaison's role, as identified in the city code, is to gather information and to report that information back to city council, but not necessarily discuss these policy issues. So this direction we're going is better. And I think that it's more consistent with an administrator, counselor administrator form of government. Okay.
I think so, but Counselor Sundin? Counselor Hubbard?
Okay.
That's the all nods. Okay.
So from that perspective, then we don't have to make a clarification about policy issues not related to employment, because we are removing 3B altogether. So I want to just bring everyone's attention to section paragraph 5, which is about personnel evaluations. And I want to talk about how it's being proposed here. Where are you on? So section 5 of the governing policy. Can you do a clean copy? By chance, is there a way to do a clean copy? Or this is fine, actually. There you go. So 5A, thank you, Crystal. Appreciate it. You're over there doing, I really appreciate that. Wow, this is following along. Okay, so the concept here is that what in that March 17th discussion, there was a lot of discussion from council about having an HR representative or an HR professional really help guide this process. And so whether that person is either a contractor or an employee, that the city can really benefit from having this person guide the process, especially at the city administrator level. But that there was a request or a discussion about deciding what that process is going to be. And it might be different every year. You know, you might do a a really big process one year, and then in another year, you could do a smaller process because you've already uncovered a lot of information. And so the way that I'm proposing for council to kind of implement these annual reviews is for council to assign a council liaison to this process and to just manage that process to help make sure it's in line with what city council's wishes. So that's a proposal. So one counselor will be selected. Oops, keep going up to 5A. One counselor will be selected by city council to work with a suitable human resource professional who will be either a contractor or employee to administer a cost-effective performance evaluation process. Does that, as just as a discussion, how does that sound to you? Does that
I
meet
think
your needs?
siloing counselors.
Just to initiate the process though, right? You're not saying going forward, one counselor.
No, it could change every year. It was just trying to have someone manage the process. It could be, maybe it would just be like the city recorder would be assigned to do that. I was trying to just identify a person because the city administrator, if he or she is being reviewed, it wouldn't necessarily be him to be administering that process.
I think the city recorder would be good because that's what's typically happening right now for HR. So they would probably have the best grasp of.
I guess I was envisioning this, we would have an HR representative, whoever it is, right? Come in and provide a proposal to council, like, hey, this is what we think the application process is. Not application, but the evaluation process. And since we are all giving input here, it seems like it would be nice that each one of us that maybe have different experiences in life and have different things that we would want to possibly focus on, that we gave input as a council instead of, siloing us all the time and liaisons and one person responsibility to define what that evaluation looks like. And then a recorder or somebody else, we're defining what the policy is. We're defining as a council what the evaluation process is. Then somebody who we assign can go forward and do that. And then depending if it's, we're evaluating John, that's one thing, but also, or the city administrator, but then he's following the same process for everyone else.
I think, and so, Mayor and Council, I really appreciate that. And I think just so you know what was in my mind too, that was the intent would be for council to have the opportunity. But I'm thinking about this process, that there does have to be someone that takes all that information and manages it with the HR professional, especially if the HR professional is not in-house. It sounds like maybe the city recorder is the best person for that role, not the council liaison. And that makes a lot of sense. And that's why we're having this discussion. But I just know how this works is that you do need someone in the city, a city employee, to manage all the feedback and make sure that the HR professional has someone to talk to and check in with about,
Seems like the hierarchy is we define as council what that evaluation looks like with an HR representative. And then, the city recorder or whomever, which seems to make the most sense, would then facilitate that.
Okay.
And I think all of us should have input on what evaluation should be.
Yeah, and I'll make that clear because that was the intent.
I think you did a great job on going through all of this, by the way. I mean, there's a lot to go through here.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that. The same process would be done for the department heads. I think that just for cost effective purposes, if that same HR professional is involved, they can kind of have the same process or maybe just tailored slightly depending on the needs. And so that's the concept. I see people reading or does anybody have any other questions? I think that is what I have to say. Oh, and actually, next, I want to discuss the changes to the city code or proposed revisions to the city code. So Crystal, will you help me and put up the city code revisions? There you go. For some reason.
Are the governing, are you gonna get to the governing rules of actual document you put together for the governing rules? Like there's some stuff in there on the governing structure and stuff like that. Are you gonna cover that too before we get into the 212 city administration?
I can do that. I was going to discuss it kind of as needed if there were any questions on it, but yeah, go ahead and let's not move on yet.
Okay, so I had number 2 for the governing structure. The part in here where it says no counselor shall act individually other than by expressions, opinion, recommendation, and motion stated during the conduct of city council meetings. So this one raises concerns because there is multiple times that you get citizens that, you know, are asking for clarification or business, and it could have been any one of us that say, you know, John, can you look into this? And so that's the way that this is written, and I'm reading this would be, we would be stepping outside of our swim lane and our boundaries by communicating or asking for, you know, John to follow up on something if it was outside of the city council.
Okay.
And it happens, I mean, it happens a lot. We do get quite a bit of that John has to chase down. Otherwise, we'd be leaving citizens waiting for 2 weeks or 3 weeks sometimes.
Mayor, that is a very good question. I think, you know, in what I will share is that this is language that is very common in cities' charters. That being said, it might be too restrictive and might need some clarification for how this works in practice. And so what I can do is look into that to identify practically what, you know, if this is something that is recommended, how does it apply in the day-to-day situation where counselors are acting in their policy roles, working with citizens on a day-to-day basis and trying to help manage, you know, the affairs of the city from a policy perspective. So let me look into that and get back to you. with more information.
And then on the department heads and employees, under department heads shall be selected by the city administrator in accordance with the recruitment and selection process determined by the city administrator, who shall weigh the public interest value of national, regional search, recruitment, whatever. So I'm gonna bring it up again on ambiguity. I'm gonna vocalize the fact that, you know, it feels that we should have policies in place that, you know, mitigate risk by, if we have vacancies or we have something, that this is the policy that we follow, and, you know, not have that ambiguity considering we are going to confirm whoever is put forth by the city administrator. So I struggle with ambiguity. I like policies, procedures. I like, okay, there's, you know, an open vacancy. It's open for 10 days internally. It's then open nationally or whatever the case is. But the ambiguity, I'm not in favor of ambiguity, and that's what that reads to me. And I don't know if there's a way to shore that up outside of, you know, in the personnel policies. There's not much. If we didn't, we went back and read that because, you know, we have, you know, the only thing I saw in here in this is the appointments and what they shall have or shall do. We're going through all of this. Why not put a process in place?
And so, Mayor, thanks for that comment. I think that, so this provision is talking about the hiring of department heads. And this is a place for the city council to decide, does it want a certain process for the hiring of all department heads? Or does it want a more flexible process? You know, Mayor use the word ambiguity, or do you want a more flexible process? I mean, this is the time to discuss it. And I guess I'm thinking, like, what do other cities do? I was just talking with a HR director of a similar sized city. And I don't remember if she said that there was a set process. That doesn't mean that there isn't necessarily value in having that process established in a governing policy.
Right. I just look at the risk probability for the city, right? And if we have more defined process, as much we are policy makers, that we have a process that I put in place, then we reduce a lot of potential exposure by being more prescriptive and defined.
Well, even aside from exposure, I know that's the way your brain thinks. The way I think is like consistency.
Yeah.
We're trying to promote consistency and equity. in the city. And so I feel like it's important for us to have a policy that we follow every time so that this is what we do. This is, you know, this is the way it's done.
Why don't, okay, and I appreciate, why don't I look into some of just common practices for what other cities are doing? And maybe John, you can help too, as far as, you know, your city administrators, city manager colleagues, so we can just come back with what's worked for other cities. And I think that can help make a decision.
And then it seems like if we do define that, then it needs to be in this personnel policies and handbook on what this is, because it's very, very limited. It is pretty prescriptive on the first 5 things that need to have if you're going to appoint, you know, somebody. But again, it's just kind of ambiguous in here. And this might be a good opportunity to potentially define and update both of them. Yeah. Councilor Sundin?
Agree. I think there's a vacancy. We know what to expect. The employees know what to expect. Just having a process. We don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. Something ready to go. Be helpful.
Could have tiers. It could be city administrator, it could be department heads, employees, and how you move in between those categories.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we should look at that if we're still going through all of this. Besieged. And then 5, we already addressed that in the other one, with it showed up here, 1 counselor would be selected.
Yep, and I
So
will
we'll fix that
remove
one.
that.
Okay, so that's all I had to say.
Very good. Just moving really quickly to the city code revisions. Please take a look at these, and these are the city's code currently is just this one paragraph that is theirs, and it really doesn't outline the responsibilities of the city administrator, and it really it leaves it to a job description, which you know, John's been here a long time. I don't know what his job description looks like. I'm sure things have been updated, and but generally these provisions that are recommended or proposed are things that are very common and that the League of Oregon Cities recommends. Here is what a city administrator's obligations or responsibilities are. So that's where these have come from, the powers and duties typically of a city administrator in this form of government.
I don't know how like I should, is on E. I just want to be clear, because we shouldn't be, you know, putting something in here that somebody is not responsible for. And again, the ambiguity piece. So it says the city administrator shall be responsible for preparing and submitting the budget to the budget committee, annual budget estimates and reports. But that is our finance director, as far as I know. So
The budget officer.
yeah, budget
Technically.
officer, but if we're assigning John, then that's to me saying, if we're reading the nomenclature here, is that he is responsible for preparing and submitting the budget. So if that's not something we're having him do, not be in here. You want to talk about that?
There have been years when I've been the budget officer.
Okay, but do you want to be responsible for each year? And then if it's not done, then
Well, the council selects the budget officer.
So I think just, I think, and I'll have to look at your code, but how a lot of cities deal with this, handle this is that in the definition of city administrator, it also says city administrator or designee. So that whoever the city administrator designates to do that is authorized to do it, but it's still the city administrator's responsibility to make sure that that gets done.
designee to this.
Well, in this case, it's us assigning who the budget officer is, not the city administrator. So therefore it could be anyone realistically.
Right, so if
That we assign as the budget officer.
But if we added the city administrator or designee shall be responsible, or city administrator's designee.
So let me just step back for a second. So in city codes, because there's a lot of places where the city administrator probably has responsibility. And so what you do is maybe in the definition for city administrator, it says it includes or designee, because the concept is that the city administrator is ultimately responsible, but he also has the power to designate. But what I don't know, and you could clarify, the budget officer, is that something that the city administrator designates, or is that something that city council designates?
I'm not confident in that answer.
I'm questioning myself. too.
Like, John, I thought you said it was us. I don't.
See the problem?
It comes to
we
you.
usually Assign.
on a calendar and the budget officer's on it. It's with the budget calendar.
I'll look into it.
The budget message is always both budget, city administrator and the budget officer too as well.
Okay.
I just am cautious on putting
that
words on a
Gloria knows.
paper to hold people accountable for things that you know, we may want to word a little different.
I appreciate your attention. So, I'll take a look at this and then John and I can also confer about this and then we can prepare a revision. You'll have some more time to take a look at it and think about these concepts. John, did you have any comments about any of these? When you reviewed it?
I think the liaison piece could use some cleaning up, the last part,
What do you mean?
And the governing policy.
in the governing policy, but onto this code change here.
Outside of what we already discussed?
No, I think
Okay.
you're on a good path.
Okay.
The restrictive process around, how we address vacancies is probably meaningful. I've read this several times and I felt good. Yeah. It's the policy versus administration, you're starting to. The lines are less blurry, so.
Okay, well, I've got my notes and I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
So, thank you very much.
All right. We are on to discussion regarding liaison rules and responsibilities. Back to this. It came up on 4/16, but it came up, I think, during our strategic planning session that we had, and Council President Chilton, I don't think you were able to make that one. But I wanted to bring this back up because, in a role of mayor, and I didn't go through a count, but there's like 44 meetings roughly during a term, right? That's with some, cancellations and some ones that we choose not to have. So there's not a lot of time to get things done. I personally don't prescribe to the rhetoric of its government, and so it takes forever. I think sometimes that is just kind of a misnomer to delay things or to have slow progress. I'm very action oriented. I think we have gathered that, but also cognizant of not burning down the council. I could meet every single day of the week to work through things, right? We've seen that happen trying to schedule meetings. And luckily we have such a good council, like, no, we need a little bit more work-life balance. But, I like the role of having liaisons. If stuff does come up where we can pop in to meetings, but I come back again to sitting, attending different board meetings and things like that we're participating, whether it's the library board, I go to that, or Parks and Trails or whatever, but we're not allocating any additional time to the actions of this council for the things that we've talked about. Councilor Sundin, you talked about wanting to get a youth council together, I had some things on the roadmap to start looking at that are outside of this, immense agendas we get for the work session. And, for the planning of the 250, or, looking at when Wayne Mayo came in for the excessive use fees and things that we want to put together. It's like there's not enough time to do it at all. So what I'm going to ask is if the council will consider at least one time a month, if we could try to get together as a strategic, like a work session, to look at some of the additional items that we're trying to put together to work on, that is, either introducing or enhancing a policy concept that we want, that we could, get to a point where we can hand it off to staff. But it just doesn't seem like, this is a bit different, obviously, than what I thought, but it's kind of feels like a lot of, just policy sign off, paper pushing, but I don't know if we're necessarily progressing any of the other initiatives. That's kind of where I'm at. It's a bit frustrating for me. And I know I'm growing into that position, but there's a lot of things. By the way, just not to sidestep, but also the other thing on communication, sometimes we meet like with John outside of, here for like development and developers and things like that, where there's communication. But anyway, back to this. I digress. So I want to know what council feels about that. If we could possibly do one additional day at least during the month that we can be more proactive on some of the other stuff, because right now it just feels like an OODA loop of I know we're keeping the city going and answering and supporting and signing off on stuff, but I thought we would be able to do a bit.
A lot more.
Well, I don't prescribe to it's government and needs to move slow. We're the ones that make the decisions up here as far as that goes. We can do what we want within reason. If we're not meeting, how are we gonna do a youth council, which I think is a fabulous idea? Or how are we going to, look at some additional things? By the time our agenda gets here, it's just buried.
There's a lot of comment coming from people and things that come up and it says, well, we'll get back to you, and Kathy takes notes or something and it doesn't ever come around again. And so would that be part of something we'd take care of, or these issues?
Well, I think it's up to us, but when we sat down at that general work session, it was again, like one of the things, looking at I kept coming back to the youth council and how would we do that? And it's not asking staff initially to do all the legwork. It's up to us to, get that information and put it together and start like with that concept and what we'd like it to look like, and then ask, for it to move forward if it was going to be something. But I don't know. I just am super frustrated. And again, it's my own personal growth that I'm going through with. I don't feel like there's a lot of stuff sitting out there. I'd like to also address like permits and go through like our permit process. We saw what happened to Halloween Town. I sent you guys when I was, in a citizen capacity, I spent 6-7 hours going through in hierarchy of what I felt was a permit failure that we had for the Halloween Town parade. It's like, are we looking at that for this year? Where do we get the opportunity to even address any of these things?
I just kind of look at how the planning commission does it. They always have time at the end of their meeting reserved for proactive items. This is the things that we want to do when we have time. Problem is, a lot of times they don't have time. Their agenda is so full that there's no time to dedicate to that. If we did meet more often, for me, it would be helpful to do it on a day that we already meet. It's like we're doing tonight. We have a meeting at 6. That to me would be more doable than adding an extra night.
Yeah, I agree. And I was just thinking in my head that just adding a proactive line item to the regular agenda could help as well alleviate that. My only concern with adding more meetings is that even if we're meeting more frequently, we're still getting all of this, huge amount of information. So are we really doing our best job of focusing on these individual items if it's all rushed into a month? We're probably not.
Well,
That's my problem, is it doesn't matter if we add another meeting in the month, it's still so heavy with information that are we truly doing our best job?
So the way I looked at that is when we had that roadmap, right? And I don't know, did you get a chance to go back and look at that meeting that the roadmap was in? So like basically touching base on the roadmap, and that would be like, hey, this is what Counselor Sundin wants to do. It's his job, right? Because this is his baby, so to speak, to go and do all the footwork and to report back where we are with that, right? So it's not like this heavy meeting, but it's a way to address these action items that are on this roadmap and what we're individually doing just to report out on the progress of this. So like, again, the 250th anniversary, right? I'm trying to pay attention to what the mayors are doing in other cities or the state, because that's going to be a big one. To come back and say, okay, well, there's some additional options or whatever the case is, or Counselor Sundin, all these different places with the youth council. This is what I'm kind of seeing we can do. It doesn't have to be this in-depth 1,200 page packet that we get for the council.
My thought is like, for instance, sorry, we're using you as an
No.
example, but if he's out
love
there
this
and
idea.
he has homework to do, research on something. And then he's also reading all the information from the quarterly departs from the division heads, and he's reading the insurance claim for the timber. Is he really doing his great job of that research? No offense, it's probably fabulous, but it's probably not your best work. Because there's so many other things that we're trying to focus our attention on and do a good job. So I'm just saying, even if we're adding meetings, the amount of information, the amount of time spent is still very heavy. So that's my thought about it.
There is some of this things that could be incorporated into our counselor reports also at the end. So this is what I'm working on. This is we've talked about this. This is what I've done since we've last met. It's more of an update rather than.
I understand your eagerness to be proactive because I feel the same way. I feel like a lot of times it takes a long time to get to stuff that you really want to work on.
It's not
Just wanna
about
make sure we
eagerness,
do a good
like,
job.
it's also being action oriented, right? There's some stuff and it's just gonna sit there until like we actually put like some initiative forward to try to, you know, put a plan, whether it's at 6 o'clock and it's once a month that we can just go through the roadmap, where are we at with that to keep like the tracking on it, right? Or whatever the case is. Like right now, it doesn't feel like we're doing any of that. It's,
I keep going back to the planning commission. So for months, maybe even years, they had architectural standards. We want to do architectural standards. Nothing ever happened. But then finally they said, okay, we're going to work on windows now. So they're finally making some progress with that because they've narrowed it down and there's a dedicated spot on their agenda for windows. So
Well, we
maybe,
talked about that in that joint meeting.
yeah,
where it was like,
maybe
let's
we
just start
could,
middle.
we could say, this is the one thing we want to tackle and we're going to add it to our agenda next 3 months. And
Yeah,
or I'm even okay if it's, you know, during the counselor updates and we can put up the roadmap. Where are we at? Roadmaps hold people accountable. That's the reality of it, right? What are we supposed to do when we're supposed to do it by? Where are we tracking? And let citizens know that these are things that are important to us as council and individuals that we're trying to achieve, and it keeps us on track. If it's out in left field and nobody's holding us, or we're not holding ourselves accountable, it's not going to get done. It's just gonna be out there, right? How long have you wanted to do a youth council?
well, when I first got elected, I looked into a youth council and I'll tell you, we have a history there of a youth council where things didn't go very well. So that was my hesitation where I backed off personally about pursuing it. I'm not saying we can't open that as a new council. I'm just saying that it's probably not going to be like, hey, we do this, we want to do this, and then next week we have a youth council.
Right, but
It's
Counselor
gonna be
Sundin
complex.
is aware that there is a historical issue there, but if that's something that's important to him and he can look at the lessons learned and corrective actions going forward on how to potentially facilitate one that would be effective, then we shouldn't be precluding or prohibiting that.
But if it's important to him, he'll bring it up in his report.
I don't know. I think not. I'm good with whatever council wants to do, but I just don't like I'm not in favor of us just going through this every week and progressing with individual stuff.
I think for now, could we add a line item for proactive items, things that we
Yes.
want to work
We
on?
could
And
start there for sure.
that would be at least be a start.
Yeah, I think that anything would be a start versus like forgetting about it completely.
I say it doesn't do any good to create a roadmap and create goals and then never look at them again.
Exactly.
They don't go anywhere.
Yeah, and I think that that's a good compromise and a solution to see how it starts and then not add additional meetings. I'm fine with that too. I mean, I'm busy too, right? But I definitely tried to make a commitment that and not saying that anybody else is, but wanted to get things done. And I get it that I'm a slight workaholic and I can just go nonstop, but want to be cognizant of everybody here, but also still move forward.
I think for the most part, our meetings have been a lot shorter and efficient. So I think generally there probably would be time to work on some of those things.
Can we have a consensus and move it up tonight to maybe look at a consensus to like add that as an agenda item that is?
Well, there's already other business on there, so couldn't we just change that from other business to proactive items? No, I don't necessarily need to vote on that or do anything
don't.
official.
I think that'd probably be fine.
I think the agenda is yours, and as far as if you want to add, counselors can always add items. John, you might want to, share your thoughts on
Yeah,
how the
just-
agenda is built.
Just from a staff perspective, I think, well, I know that the department heads, employees value the council having goals and, something to look up forward and to try to achieve those goals. Producing more meetings is a lot of administrative intensity, as all the advertising and minute taking and production time. And it takes not just getting the meeting ready, but it's after the meeting and debriefing and following up on things and getting back to people. So, there's a lot there, but I think there's a more frequent opportunity to do a check-in on goals.
So we could do it just at our regular session. We could even have it at every meeting if we wanted, if it was just the AKA other business. Counselor Hubbard, what's your thought?
Well, we started that about 3 years ago, the proactive item. And it's worked really well.
The joint, or the planning commission?
The planning commission, when I was on that, and it's worked really well because it's just like we were just talking about. Always something that wants to come up or could come up and get it on the list and then go through it and start it. And like was brought up, the architectural, sort of like, well, where are we gonna go with it? And they struggled with it for a little bit. Then they finally said, well, let's just focus on one section of it, a window. That's working out well. So I think that's a good way.
It doesn't mean that we all have to have any potential goals either, right? But it could be like, Counselor Sundin has a specific goal, or that Counselor Hubbard that, he's working towards having a presentation to staff. Like, I think it's not a requirement of this council to have a goal, but if one of us or more of us have them, then it's some way to facilitate that discussion, be transparent with the citizens on what we're trying. Maybe they get excited about whatever that is, I'd love to see, more ideas coming in about the 250th. Like, that's kind of an exciting thing. So anyway, I think we kind of discussed this one to that. So
That would be my vote, just incorporate it into what we've already got scheduled.
perfect. All right. And then Leslie's report from city administrator.
All right, thank you, Mayor. I'm going to start off my report with some condolences to Dave Elder and his family. Dave was our public works supervisor he was with the city for 29 years and retired just fairly recently with 29 years of service. He passed away at the end of April there. And his service will be coming up on May 19th. And those employees that want to go to it, we're going to let them go to that service. It's our policy to let them do that. So something a little less condolence. Jenny Dimshow has noticed that she intends to go off and pursue life's adventures and
Horrible.
and gone in July, we believe. So she'll be here and long enough to wrap up the projects, report out on all the grants, all the tremendous and wonderful work she's done. That will leave a big hole in our capacity for sure, and our grant writing ability and our success. And with that, I'm not saying goodbye to you quite yet, but I just want to let the council know that they hadn't heard that already. So I want to thank the Public Works team for coming together and getting the parking lot over here. We took advantage of the street closure right there to get all the weeds and the broken curbs fixed and the hedge trimmed and the wall painted and striping. It really looks nice. The sign's not crooked anymore. Judge Lingard and I was walking around a couple of weeks ago and Judge Lingard around the corner walking and she said, this looks nice, but what about your parking lot? And so and we brought it up. Public Works got it done. It was it's great. Good teamwork. You heard earlier, the Riverwalk project's wrapping up. You haven't been down there. It's really looking nice. And it's really nice to see people walk out and they're just in a sense of awe when they get onto the plaza right there and they're starting to come up, look over the, imagining what it's going to be like, what it is. Same with the streets and utility projects. It's good to have the intersections back open and then less disruption for everybody in the traffic confusion there. And, they're all on deadline. Everything's looking to be done on time for 13 nights and all the events and activities. We have had some additional interest in development in the riverfront, so that's very encouraging. Not only the one that Mayor and Councilor Hubbard met with, but another one's coming forward saying that they're potentially interested as well. So that's
Another one?
very encouraging. And there's a point where the public investment is made and we're handing it off to the private to do the private thing and putting in the mixed use buildings and getting that tax investment and really center of our community right here. And so it feels good. So and we want to find a developer that shares our vision for the site as well, as far as quality of development, the types of construction things. 13 nights, it's, the grass is growing. It'll be somewhere in the vicinity here. We may do it over in the plaza like we did at Christmas. I think I mentioned that last time, but we're ready to pivot, working with Treadway closely on that. Still the June 26th is going to be that celebration ribbon cutting event in the plaza with a pretty good invite list. So you can all attend, and we're looking earlier over here at the stickies on the note, on the map. They're wondering what that was for, and Take Your Child to Work Day. They had a pretty good turnout, and they all came up and stuck to where they lived, or got as close as they could to where their house was. It was fun. Crystal did a fantastic job to turning people along. Councilor Chilton was participated as well.
Just had a great job, Public Works. They had a skeleton up and it was a lot of fun. The kids got to dig and yeah. Shout out to Ethan.
Awesome. I really liked the budget one where they had to like.
Yeah, Jamie, that was really good too. I was like, okay, I need to start saving now too. Thank you, Jamie.
Yeah. So a couple other things with sorry, I jumped down a bunch here. We heard from the Kiwanis earlier today. Our intent is to have a city show at this show your wheels. We're intending to put city vehicles into this parade and need people to drive them.
I'm gonna drive one.
Yes, I do, if there are other people that want to drive or pass out flyers on council.
Just walk alongside, yeah.
We do need a couple more
I
people.
will walk. I'm not gonna drive.
Okay, that's fine.
I'll just decorate my own vehicle.
I need more people to pass flyers.
So also meeting with Treadway soon on Community Day, getting that wrapped up and going. Sand Island Sandcastle Festival, Treadway's reached out to the sand carvers. They're interested. We still have some logistics to kind of wind down about getting the transportation back and forth to the island there, but it's getting a lot closer, working with Coast Guard. The PG substation is advancing. We're gonna have two agreements for you. One is an agreement between PG and the city, and the other agreement's gonna be the grant agreement with the state. I have both of those documents for next meeting. Jordan Ramus is working on those agreements, has reviewed those agreements and make sure that we're well covered. Arcadia, Project Arcadia is advancing to their closing date, which is contingent upon when they get the environmental approval. It's all going well. We've stepped in as a property owner to help them get their boiler permits, working with their quality division of DEQ, and DEQ seems very supportive of the project. They like the environmental benefit of having the smaller boiler where it's not having the 300-foot stack, and it's a lot less emissions that would be happening with this much more efficient boiler. And that's all going really well. I mentioned the senior center and the lease agreement. That should be ready for your next meeting. It's under review with the May 21st meeting. We're also going to have the agreement with the Columbia Learning Center. The Makerspace expansion use, that's, I got an agreement from the Columbia Learning Center that we're reviewing, and that should be for the next meeting. And it came in after this deadline for this meeting. The additional space, Makerspace area.
Not right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Columbia Learning Center owns the building, we're leasing it. Yeah. Ashley and I have been working on some performance evaluation processes, reaching out to some contractors that do those types of activities. We have some feedback on that, so sharing that when the time's right. Got bargaining dates with both our collective bargaining units, ASME and St. Helens Police Association. You know, it's a really tough budget year. I think we all know that. So we're gonna, do the best we can. The yesterday met with, this room was mostly filled with staff at the lunch hour, and listened to them talk about what they would do to save money or to reduce revenue. And it actually came up with some, it was a good conversation, very simple and inclusive. I felt good about having them here and giving their feedback, but there are some pretty good ideas that Gloria's evaluating that might help the budget out. all the way to where we need to be, but it's leaning in here trying to resolve this. And last, or maybe not quite lastly, but I think Ashley mentioned that the police chief recruitment process and the panels, everything's dialed in for that. Interviews on May 29th. So that'll schedule to be here in this room. And then revisiting the clearing confusion and setting the record straight is something that's been on the agenda that it's been pretty time consuming for our staff, time consuming for legal counsel. It's following up with all the department heads, all the legal issues, and things that some things don't even have answers that come up that are really
So this is a good conversation because when we started talking about that, my understanding was that it was going to be items that we identified that we wanted to put on that memo. So for example, after the first meeting, there were 3 different items, like the water bill and a couple things that I had sent over and said, is this stuff that we could put on that we had discussed at the council? I personally was not of the understanding that Crystal was going through every single one of the meetings and trying to extrapolate what should be put there for public comment. I had no idea that she was doing that. I don't know if the rest of the council did. I thought they were going to be hot topics that we identified as council that we would like to have on that memo, not having somebody pour through the meeting minutes to try to identify. I don't know what you guys, your interpretation, I didn't even know that that was going on.
But I definitely don't want her doing that.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a good use of her time.
No.
But I do think that it was left pretty open. So
Yeah.
I can understand why the city staff may have
Yeah.
interpreted it that way, because since that started, I have not one single time said, hey, I want this addressed during that time. So I don't know who was doing that.
So there
Just
was-
you?
It was the first one that we came up. There was 3 different items that came up and there were things that also when discussed. And I'm not sure if like I'm not sure if you were at that meeting or not. I don't remember. But it was like, if there's hot topics that we're seeing, like misinformation out on social media, or there's somebody that comes and makes a public comment, that we could address it and then it would be put on there so that we'd have a place to direct people to go. No idea that she was sitting and pouring through these meetings. So we can clarify, I believe now, on what the intent is certain items that are identified by council to put on there, or the city administrator. And that is what we would put on there. I mean, one of them was, public comment and, how long or, whatever the case, if we had to have one, those type of things that come up. Not pouring through and trying to identify what it is. Just seems like they should be topics that come up that we identify, or John, the city administrator, identifies that this is a point of interest within the city that we probably should have some city stance on. Seems pretty simple.
It's a lot more feasible. I think it's a good time to evaluate too and see if there's a benefit to it at all. The ones that are coming in here and giving false information, it's not going to convince them otherwise, but. And then
I feel
are
like they just came back with pretty much.
people
the same-
actually going to look at the information and is it useful?
Well, I would ask if it's not unuseful, if there's no point to, let me rephrase that and articulate it better. It's there. There's a process in place. We have a place on the website. We have a vehicle to use it if in fact we need it. We don't need it every time. We've gone through multiple meetings that it hasn't. So I don't think it's not affecting anything if we have it there and have it available as a tool. However, not having Crystal go through and do it is, I think, the key here, or staff. It's if in fact we identify as council something that comes up based on public comment, or something we're getting hit, like in our citizens are coming to us, like asking these questions, or the city administrator feels that there is a point to address it, then it's available on the website. We have a place to put it. It's there. It's a tool. Doesn't mean we have to use it every time. At least it's there.
I mean, I when you were like, let's try this, you know, just being open-minded about it, and I continue to remain open-minded about it, but I do think, you know, down the line, we, maybe in a month or two, we do look at it again. Is this helpful? How much time is being spent on it? Should we continue doing it? So I think it's worth re-evaluating from time to time.
Reevaluating everything is always good to see how it's doing. I think if it's just there in the background, it's there if we need it, and if we don't need it, then we're not spending any time on it. There's no calories burned. But if something does come up, then we have a place to put it. I know I have directed several people to the city website about the water bill once it was posted there, and it's very helpful. It's the same consistent information that we're putting out.
Just because I think I was one of the people that flagged, like, this is, seems to be a lot of staff time and resources. What I hear you saying is instead of having staff evaluate it, it would be something that if a counselor believes at the end of a meeting, or if the city administrator believes there was a misstatement of fact, they can email this staff person, maybe it still is Crystal, or
It would be
or maybe
John.
it would be John. You email John, and then he would get that addressed, or even decide whether or not to address it. But at least that would be, it's something that city councilors initiate.
Yeah. Or we're something.
If there's nothing, then there's nothing.
Yeah, or we're seeing it out in public that this is misinformation that is being wildly and grossly misspread, you know, then we can use that as an opportunity for a landing page to direct people to, because it's very hard when you're trying to present, you know, go to this section of a YouTube video or whatever the case is. It's a nice tool if we have it for a place to put information that we want to have consistency and continuity when we're expressing it, but at the same time, we don't need to be trying to find things to put on there. So just didn't know that was happening. I feel horrible. Like, I am so sorry, Crystal, that you were doing that. I had no idea. I thought it was just based on what we were presenting, like when we brought over those 3 things and we provided the links, and here's the law, and this is the ORS, and I had no idea. So I sincerely apologize you were doing that.
Okay, I think
We would have not known clear.
Well, I mean, there was discussion amongst staff about not being clear about who was determining what we were responding to, and there was
Yeah.
sort of direction from council that it was in reply to visitor comments of misinformation.
And so you're.
So I had been going through after all the meetings, cataloging all the visitor comments that might have had information stuff. And anyway,
I will totally accept that failure, but I guess not clarification. I had honestly no idea that, again, that you were doing that. That was not my interpretation or understanding at all, but I'm glad. And it goes with any other staff member. If something comes up, like, say something, right? Because I think everybody up here is very open to be receptive. Yikes.
so it sounds like moving forward, council will all get any necessary
For John.
clarifications to John. He'll likely forward them to me. The one I've heard from this meeting, at least from you, was the tourism budget.
Yeah, if we could get that put on there, that would be really
Excellent.
helpful, that we could direct people to that one place, because it is, if council agrees, that is a good place to direct everybody to. Trying to have people go to the meeting minutes or YouTube video and say, go to this section of it, it's kind of a nightmare, but our website is well maintained, and that is really easy to find right there that they can go. So.
And then do you want that as a standing agenda item that we put in each time and say whether there is nothing or is something, or just put it on the agenda as there's?
I think it's great to have it on the agenda. We can just say nothing to report.
Okay.
But at least there's.
That helps me though, because then I'll have a blank one for if we don't have anything for that one.
Yeah, just,
You
there's
could live
nothing.
under work session action items too.
Well, and the other thing from today during public comment was the chamber's concern with the loitering signs. I think maybe seeing what our current policies are around loitering signs, or, you know, because I don't really know how to answer them in that, like, from a city stance.
Yeah, you can just direct people back there. My gosh, I know. Something.
Do you have any questions? I think that concludes my report.
Thank you, Sean. Okay, so we're going to be adjourning this council work session and going into executive session. We're gonna be going into executive session under real property transactions under ORS 1926602E. Exempt records, confidential attorney-client privilege memo under ORS 1926602F, and consult with counsel potential litigation under ORS 1926602H. Representatives and news media staff and other persons are or other persons approved shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience shall leave council chambers. And I'm wondering if because Crystal, we're
Leaving after I shut this
we
down
need to
and do
let
the
stay.
things that we'll be staying.
record the.
Yeah, I'll be in here.
Got it. All right, so this work session is adjourned at 5:05 PM. What is our reader?
I don't know, that's why I was hoping.
Minutes, so, cause I gotta do my normal lockup stuff, but there's pizza in the break room if anyone wants to